Record. Okay. So yes, and just for the record, this is Lockdown Still Lives show and tell. Hello, Dave. We get a hand. Yay! Oh, yay! And
Oh.
it comes up. Hi. Excellent. Great. Good beginning. Good start to the meeting. That's nice. So yes, this is Lockdown Still Live show and tell. I have forgotten which part it is number-wise, but it is about artist networks today. And we had a little break, and I think it was nice to actually have a bit of a break. You know, it makes us feel like we're like a proper organization that takes a summer break or something, and we have really kind of important other things to do. So welcome back, everybody, and I hope you had a good rest and, you know, kind of looked at archives in the attic, cleared out spaces in an emotional way, kind of had, you know, recovered from painting plates. And I know, Sarah, you've been in Shirethorn setting things up as well, and Lisa, you're back to teaching, so I know everybody's been busy in some shape or form. Anyway, I'll go on and on. I would like to hand over to you to kind of talk about artist networks. And who would like to go first? Do we have anybody? I know Julia kind of teased us a little bit already with an image on.
He has very much teasing, yes.
Isn't it Facebook? So I'm very intrigued where that's going to go.
I'm a little bit worried that after my suggesting the subject, I've kind of given it a bit of a twist.
Well, if you're okay,
You're teasing again.
I don't mind doing it. The sooner I do it, the sooner I can listen to everybody else's without any, right, okay.
I'll spotlight you.
Okay, let's see, I've got it minimize somewhere, haven't I, Roger?
Yeah.
Okie doke. Right.
It looks nice behind.
Have you shared? Have you hit share?
Oh, how do I? Oh, no, I didn't. Where did I should hit share? Oh, gosh.
Bottom, the green, share screen.
I've done it again. It's been such a while, I've forgotten.
Right, hang on.
I've got it up. I shouldn't have done that before. Should I? Share? Maybe close that and then.
Just minimize that.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, screen.
Share. Sorry. Thank you. Right. Okie doke. Right. Well, as I said, I've kind of. Well, I've messed with the idea of a group of artists in order to talk about two things I was reading about. So it's a bit cheeky, but it is kind of about groups, but in a different way. It's about affinity of artists, right? Right, well, I begin with this made-up word, which Roger adapted from anachronistic to transchronistic. Which I hope this word describes what I'm going to talk about in a way. Having suggested artist groups as a subject, I was more drawn to the word affinity, which David, who isn't here, used in our last meeting, which was a long time ago. But I liked the word affinity, so I decided to go with that. As someone who appropriates work from art history, I wanted to draw an affinity between artists born long apart, like me and, you know, the ones I appropriate from. However, I narrowed it down to two artists that I particularly wanted to talk about. So, okay. Oh dear. Okay. Having spent many a sociable hour in the National Gallery, the Sainsbury's Wing Cafe and Restaurant overlooking Trafalgar Square, I am ashamed to say that I had not really looked at Paula Rager's mural in there, derived from a Crivelli painting, and it's therefore called Crivelli's Garden, which again, I didn't know. I located an interview she gave And I've now located a load more actually, but this particular interview was about making this work, which at one point she refers to as posh wallpaper, which really amused me. Even though she says it is one of the pieces of work she most enjoyed doing. I myself have created mythological wallpaper, which related to the family, students, tutors, and my personal history, using a method not unlike pastoral toile wallpaper. I developed my own version at Hassad for my second degree. I did that. And I took lots of people who were in the college and turned them into mythological characters, a bit like what I've been doing with all of you. I yet again turned familiar people into shapeshifters, which is not unlike what Paula Rego does a bit as well in this particular mural, where she dips into all the artists that she's interested in the gallery. Anyway, these were some of my wallpaper drawings where I, believe it or not, that one, I cast the head of the art at the time, Desmond, as Zeus, and me pleading for a good degree. They were all small in little, you know, they had to look for them. And quite a few of the tutors told me how cheeky I was. Anyway, when Paula Rego took up the appointment at the National Gallery as an associate artist in 1990, she was required to produce work directly related to the collection to be hung in the restaurant cafe. Her mural references so much work from the collection, directly inspired by the Crivelli's painting, which has a kind of garden in it, which she'd been taken by one of the curators to look at. But then as she began to work on it, as she always does, she started involving her own personal history. She had chosen to focus on female saints in the collection, of which there are a surprisingly limited number. So she began by reading about the mythologies surrounding them, because that's what they are really, mythologies. Her own cultural preoccupations are derived from the peasant Portugal of her youth, which no longer exists. Her insistence on the connection of this mural to her childhood is evident in the interview I read. The stories she tells are loaded with meaning, and she refers to Christianity as a very good story. Sometimes she's been accused of infantilism in her work, but she embraced this criticism by describing her studio as her playroom, which I love. She speaks of the mannequins made by her son-in-law, Ron Muick, as if they were real people, good and bad. And I can definitely relate to that because I surround myself by mannequins. They're like my group. These props need to come to life for her in order to play their part in her paintings. Her son, Nicholas, has said that in spite of her eventual success, she was often dismissed and discriminated against, while his father, Victor Willing, was always considered an important painter. However, it must be said that he always believed in her work and supported in it. And this is a part of the mural. And I saw another thing on television recently where she explained she's mixed and matched all sorts of things to do with biblical tales, mythologies, her own history, Portuguese fairy tales, you name it, she does it. Paula tells her story through pictures rather than words, but there is so much symbolic content relating to her experience as a woman born into a country that was ruled by a dictator, Salazar, who was dismissive of women, pretty much dismissive of everybody from what I can make out. Her work is a revolt against all that chauvinistic society, but also a celebration of her cultural history. During the making of the mural, she included the faces of people she knew, some of whom worked at the gallery. see where I feel this connection. And she was saying how supportive some were, but some she didn't like. So this inclusion of people she knows starring in roles within her paintings is evidence of the connection I feel with her. But also another artist, this time a man born in the 1400s. And here comes another of my favorite artists who I feel there is an affinity between. I think this picture is particularly interesting as part of the wall because it's the visitation she's doing in that. But this little person here who's kind of narrating it is somebody she made friends with in the gallery who helped her so much that she made her kind of the narrator in the story. Oh, and that's my son Owen, that was on my wallpaper, lying up in the mountains in Scotland when he was a child. Little boy Blue. He's now huge and in his 30s. It seems to me that artists support one another across generations of art history by giving inspiration and succor to one another. Defining the art of the past is an impossible task, even for the most erudite of historians, and viewing the work of an artist such as Hieronymus Bosch, 1450 to 1516, in an era described as late Gothic by some and early Renaissance by others, is full of pitfalls. So, of course, I chose to try and do it. And here we have another garden, the Garden of Earthly Delights, which starts with rather nice things and ends with rather horrible, hellish things and everything that's going on in between. The religious nature of his imagery is unfamiliar to us living now, but can only be interpreted as a chronicler of dreams, when such grotesque visions appear in his work. The truth may be that whilst his imagination gave life to such terrible flights of fancy, he relied to some extent on the symbolism of his times. For instance, he concerns himself very much with medieval animal symbolism, which is something I'm very partial to, especially with my appropriating of Piero di Cosmo's things. Strangely, I actually heard an interview online with her where she mentions Piero di Cosmo, which again made me feel I had a connection. Anyway, I think he's often thought of as avant-garde in a way because of the unusual nature of his paintings. But having been reading about him, he's not quite the avant-garde type artist we consider him to be in current times. He was relying on a language developed alongside his observation of nature and landscape as a way to perhaps express not only his religious beliefs, but the shortcomings of humanity. Perhaps we need him around now. His garden is called the Garden of Earthly Delights. And here we have some of the, I'm sure you're all too familiar with, and there he is. I've looked so long at that picture to try and work out what was going on in that head. His success did not come from being an outsider, as we might think, in a modern allusion to his work, but as part of a brotherhood of civic dignitaries whose commissions he relied upon and helped him become both wealthy and successful, which actually, so did Paul Orega eventually become wealthy and successful. He had a privileged upbringing with a family of successful artists, and there are parallels with Paul Orega, whose own rather privileged life in Portugal was steeped in moral diktats. However, in London, where she came when she was 17, she became acquainted with the Garden of Earthly Delights, which left her having many abortions, followed by the birth of her daughter to Victor Willing, who went back to his wife initially. I won't go on about that too much. The storytelling aspect of Bosch's work, like Paul Orega, owed much to biblical tales, the prospect of hellfire and damnation. If one did not foster moderation and discipline in social behaviour, which was inherent in both their backgrounds, members of the brotherhood that Bosch belonged to regularly came together for meals on feast days, and a document in 1518 prescribed that they should meet together in truthfulness, calm, and good cheer, just like we do. It was forbidden for any man to drink more than half a jug of wine at these gatherings for fear he should become quarrelsome and unreasonable. Imagine that. Anyway, there I've again put in a working, because I think it's quite important also that these paintings, she didn't do them all I've discovered she did one in Portugal, then it all went wrong and she started to, but they aren't actually painted on the wall straight into the cafe on the mural. They are pieces, like pieced together. And I liked it because they were almost like a kind of comic strip of stories, putting them together. Hieronymus Bosch was very much part of the establishment, and by comparison to Paula Rego as a woman, she too relied on and was dependent on commissions like most artists, but how she executed the work was possibly left up to her. It's probably left up to Bosch as well, I imagine. So producing work that the patrons want is, for a variety of reasons, very revealing. I suppose, whilst to modern eyes Bosch is considered to be anarchic in his work, comparing these two artists has helped me to redefine what anarchic actually means. Paula Reger's work was inspired a lot of the time by a need to revolutionise the place of women in art. I'm not even sure she knew that what she was doing. She so kind of works in such a strange and unusual way I find fascinating. And she developed her own language of symbolism, which gives expression to her innermost fears and memories. And a lot of those aren't very nice. So, and she talks about being a child and being very frightened, even as a child. Paula Reger's work was inspired a lot of the time by a need to revolutionise the place of women in art. I've just said that. And she develops her own, I've said that. Right, in these times of immorality by our own government and self-interest, I've pondered on how anyone can bring about a belief in truth and goodness, with no way of imposing a morality on society, which has come to rely on populist celebration of the individual. There always seems to be an irony to effecting change by our artistic endeavours as individuals. It is only when we come together that real change appears to be effective. Morality, of course, has been modified to accept so much of what was once deemed deviant in an attempt to help us understand what goodness really is and how it can be relevant now. The artist is still perhaps required to examine the nightmare that modern life has become as we reference the vast knowledge we have access to through technology, making the art that has gone before seem to me to be even more relevant. I suppose I remain convinced that artists can give meaning to life and a point us in the direction of a more thoughtful, caring world. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother, or would I? Maybe I would. For me, this group, Is Lockdown Still Lives, has gone some way to giving me hope that coming together provides us with the opportunity to examine a way forward by perhaps at times looking backwards. So this is the supportive group I want to belong to currently. Here you all are, as perceived by me, a little window into my wishful world, a garden under the sea, where we realise we are part of nature and nature is part of us. And there you all are. Although the embroidery, I think, is going to take a bit longer to start.
Aww.
That was nice.
Okay. I'll come back and
It's a lot there.
It's interesting, isn't it, Julia? I just love the way, yeah, you've taken two artists, you know, and explored how you relate to them and how you kind of, how do you call it, transchronistic rather than anachronistic?
Oh, Roger just came up with that word. Because
really
I was
like that.
thinking about time, and how time is, you know, for me is quite important, that I can see things that I relate to that are
Yeah.
totally from centuries and centuries ago of different artists. But I feel like that's the group I belong to. It's
Yeah.
this group that dips in and out of anything I fancy, right? But mostly a lot of old masters, because the further away it gets, the more I feel it's like a puzzle to decipher, and wonder why I'm attracted to certain things. I mean, with Paula Rego, obviously she's hugely popular and she's been very successful, but I relate a lot to her feminist themes. But like I say, I'm not absolutely sure that that's where she starts from. She isn't trying to illustrate feminism. She just, you know, somehow comes up with these personal stories that.
Well, Julie, did you see that program 2 nights ago?
I did actually.
And I mean, what she was trying to do with that, those early paintings, were to show how women were treated in art schools.
Oh, I know, but she was so naive when she came, and I think probably an awful lot of us from, I mean, she's even before me, and I found the misogyny and problems that I had when I went to art college, and I think I was equally as naive. I might not have come from Portugal and you know, but my mother was equally much one who just said, just beware of boys, didn't tell you anything about why. And you puzzle that out yourself, really.
I'm fascinated by Ron Muick being Paula Rego's son-in-law. Crumbs. I can see it now, but I can't see it now. That's stupid, but it's an interesting connection.
Talking about patrons, well, her daughter was on the programme the other night. Michelle was talking about patrons. Saatchi came into the room, into her studio, and he saw the Pinocchio that Ron Muick made for her to paint from, and because she needed a Pinocchio, so he made her one. And he came in and saw that, and that's what started Ron Muick's career, because up until then he was a commercial artist. And said, "Oh, that's good, I'll have that," like Saatchi would do. Saatchi.
Julia, what I love about how you approach this is because in a way you didn't use an existing artist network. You kind of almost created your own dream artist network, isn't it? It's almost like when people ask you, who would you have for your dinner party? But I think you kind of picked the people that you would have in your artist network if you could pick kind of the people that you go to for inspiration, or kind of have that really good insightful chat, or ask those questions and maybe find out a bit more about yourself as an artist, isn't it? There's a bit of I get the feeling, bit of a mirror in there, isn't it? You see yourself reflected in some of those aspects. It would actually be nice maybe one day, I don't know whether you would have picked any others, or are these the only two that you...
If it was a dinner party, I wouldn't pick Piero di Cosimo, because according to Vasari, and he lived on boiled eggs. He was very eccentric. He lived on boiled eggs. And I think he used all the shells for making his tempura. So he just apparently lived on boiled eggs. So I wouldn't have him at a dinner party, but I think I would just love to understand the symbolism and the language, because it's a bit like when we were talking about the Robert Macfarlane book and the landscape, the words. There are so many animal things that mean certain things, that, if a swan's hung over a door, that will suggest it's a brothel, and all sorts of things that are completely mysteries, but and the weird thing is you can get to them quite accidentally yourself without having a glossary of the images. You're drawn to these images and you think, why? And then you find out, turns out I'm not the first person to use this. It's part of, you know, a painting structure, you know, of the actual sort of methods that people use to, and that's why I love Paula Rego, because she's just so funny as well. She's just so funny all the time about why she picks things, and she has a little giggle about it. And I love it.
I love Paula Rego's work, but I always find it's a lot of the paintings for me, I have a real gut reaction to them, which is quite, you know, I mean, it's not unusual, but it's to most of her work, and also it takes quite a while to figure out exactly what's going on, and I can keep going back. I think I've said that before, like, and looking and finding new things, and then really kind of, and then at different points in my life I sort of think, oh, I get that now, I kind of understand that.
Yeah.
And I mean, the one I always remember when I was younger looking at was the one, I can't remember the name, but it's the young girl who's about to get married, and it's the wedding dress fitting, and she's absolutely enormous, and the mum is really tiny, and she's kind of really proudly sort of stitching, or kind of like, you know, like it's like a fitting, and it's just really interesting relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are all these things all the time, and because I haven't really, I feel quite ashamed. I said at the beginning that, but she did say, well, I've done it all in black and white and greys, almost like a graphic novel, because she said, I didn't want it to be, people are going there for cups of coffee, and they didn't want it in their face. How wonderfully sort of, you know, humble that was, the way she said that. And now I feel awful, because I used to glimpse at it and think, oh, that's an interesting bit, and that, but I didn't realize the massiveness of it, and the way she had been in the gallery, you know, picking up on all these little bits of stories in each of the paintings she was referring to. Lovely. But Dave Bales isn't here, and he hates Paula Rego, which is partly why I did it, and he isn't here. Well, I don't know that he hates her, but he went,
I actually like the ones in the middle, you know, not the ones where she's actually got people, but where they started going abstract with like body parts put together.
Yeah, well, I love her abstract.
I love those better than the other, because the other is more in your face, whereas those, I didn't know those at all.
They're all full of stories, all the dogs and the dog woman, and everything. They're very abstract. Somebody once said to me, Anthony Hausman said to me, I said, oh, well, I didn't think you'd like my work because you're abstract. And he said, Julia, your work is really abstract. And I love that. I was really pleased, because I think of it like that, but then I think people think it's very photorealist, perhaps. No, not photo. No, he does. But it's about the stories. It's all about the stories and the words and the images and the symbolism. And anyway.
Lovely. There is a lot in there, isn't it? It's great. And Hieronymus Bosch as well. I mean, you know, where do you start? What a mind. And when was he about? I mean, that's like, that does blow my mind. I mean, he must have been such an, you know, I mean, he was well regarded, but I don't know enough about him, but it always fascinates me. Anyway, great. So next, who would like to go next?
I'm happy to go next.
Okay, excellent. Jill?
Partly because of a few conversations with what Julia's just done. So I think there's women and wallpaper in it. So. There we go. Okay, so I'll start. So, didn't mean to do that. There we go. So, like all of us, I guess, I began to think about artist groups and networks and why artists get together and work together whether that's because of friendship or family ties, shared approaches, styles, philosophy, or politics. Or because there's strength in numbers if you're in a marginalised, overlooked, or undervalued group. Joining with others amplifies your voice and increases visibility. In these examples, I've explored artist groups via some of my favourite examples, a tiny bit like Julia maybe. I'm starting with Impressionism and the second half of the 19th century, which is where my art history really began. And that was an art history that in my early days was full of isms. And I think the Impressionists are so familiar and liked. It's sometimes hard to appreciate just how revolutionary they were. The movement took place between 1874 and 1886 and was defined or marked by 8 group shows with different permutations of around 30 artists who exhibited at the different shows in different groups. They called themselves the Independents, or the Anonymous Society of Artists, and they came together in a shared rejection of the art system and establishment. They sought their own exhibition venues away from the official salon, and their subject matters were contemporary everyday life, not the religious, classical, or historical subjects that were deemed to be more appropriate. Their paintings revealed process and materials, and they aimed to capture the world as it appeared to them, as opposed to reproducing existing knowledge, memories, or formulas. And this sketch, well, this painting by Monet I put 1969, it's 1863, just 100 years out. Was actually, it just predates Impressionism, and there's evidence to suggest that he made it, when he first made it, it was a sketch, which was a traditional process that artists made at the time. I used to remember the names for them, but there would be different stages, including a sketch that you made, outside in front of the subject matter, and different stages. And then you take those back to the studio to produce the final painting. But there's evidence to suggest that Monet embarked on this and then changed his mind and declared, probably not declared, but saw the sketch as the final piece, as the kind of final statement, thus revealing the painting's process. So yeah, there is some evidence to suggest he started off on a more traditional process, but then hijacked it, and this became the kind of final work. And it flouted the traditional strict hierarchy of genres at the time. So to paint ordinary everyday people, everyday life at a certain scale was seen to be quite transgressive, really. And these people may not be the rich Parisians. They could well be, this is a kind of suburb of Paris, they could well be the workers on a rest from, working life, a lunchtime rest or something like that, or a weekend break. So they aren't necessarily the rich and the famous. So a few Impressionist paintings. This is a painting by Pissarro. And I haven't read tons about Impressionism, although that's, as I say, where my art history began. But often when I read about Pissarro, he seems to be a bit of a father figure or mentor. He seems to have worked with the Impressionists and then some of the post-Impressionists. So I imagine him a bit as the glue that joins them together. And then my final Impressionist painting is by a woman. So this is Bertha Morisot. So the Impressionists did include, 1 or 2 female artists, which is quite extraordinary for the time. And here Morisot paints Julie, the wet nurse that she employed, feeding Morisot's own daughter. So it's quite an extraordinary painting of 2 women at work at a time when attending life classes or even scrutinising your own husband for the purpose of drawing or painting of him would have been banned or frowned upon. So I've always found this quite an extraordinary painting. Like, I guess Julie had to feed the daughter in order for Bertha Morisot to be able to paint her. So it's quite an interesting connection. So I'm going to leap forward in time. Following the Impressionists, 20th century modern art unfolded through a whole raft of isms: Cubism, Constructivism, Surrealism, many of which are so fascinating and all of which were revolutionary in their own way. That was almost by the definition of the new ism, was that it had to break with the thing that went before. But I'm going to leap over these with Morisot in mind to the Guerrilla Girls, who worked and exhibited as an anonymous collective. I haven't managed to get the date right here, 1989, in order to counteract the myth of the male individual genius around which much art history is constructed. So they deliberately remained anonymous, worked as a group, exhibited as a group in order to get away from that kind of focus on the individual, and so that it was their collectivity that was important. And after Duchamp, they used one of my favourite art history, I think it's homonyms, where you've got two words that sound the same but mean different things, so guerrilla and gorilla. So I really like that. My next slide represents the group Spiral, who were a group of Black African-American artists who came together to combat racism and exclusion in the art world. They formed in 1963 as part of the wider kind of civil rights movement for jobs and freedom, and the March on Washington, which I think, I recall this as a figure, and I might be wrong, involved 250,000 people, that march in Washington, and at which Martin Luther King made his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. The group included an artist called Romer Berden. I probably haven't pronounced that right, and who's one of my long-standing favourite artists, who produces these really extraordinary collages, combined fragments from magazines, kind of work together, which maybe speak of or to identity and identities in the civil rights era, that kind of jostling for position and those harsh edges. But Romer Berden is a fascinating artist. I don't know how much people know about him, but I was just reading up on him a bit again to remind myself of him. And he studied with Bachelard, the Poetics of Space, that writer. He studied with George Grosz, who was one of the German expressionists. And I think I'm right. Again, this might be a memory that's not quite accurate. I think he was also involved with the abstract expressionists. So he was, post Second World War in America, but maybe shunned by them, and not quite accepted by them. So that's something that's in the back of my mind. But such an interesting and exciting artist. In Britain, there were equivalent groups of Black African artists. So the two groups I was going to mention were the BLK art group from Wolverhampton Polytechnic, who were all children of Caribbean migrants, and included Donald Rodney and Lubaina Himid. And then these artists went on to contribute to the Black Arts movement, British Black Arts movement, which began in 1982. So I'm representing these two groups by two works, but one by Donald Rodney and one by Sonia Boyce. Again, two hugely favourite artists of mine. So this is a piece by Donald Rodney, and it's called In the House of My Father. And I don't know if people remember it, but I remember it being in the Ferrens in an exhibition in it would have been quite a long time ago. It was an exhibition of works, the sort of British collection, and pieces travelled round. So I remember it, I'll never forget seeing it. I think it's an extraordinary piece. Like, I'm really interested in houses in art anyway, as people know, but this tiny fragile house in the palm of someone's hand by someone for whom home almost definitely was a a fragile thing anyway. But Donald Rodney had, I think it was sickle cell anemia. So this is the skin from his own skin from different medical procedures that he had. So this is his own skin. And he also did a piece that's in, I think it's much earlier, called The House That Jack Built. So he's got lots of houses in his work. So that anyone who might be interested, I don't blow the trumpet of Critical Fish, but in the first ever edition, there was a fascinating interview. I'm really sorry, I've forgotten the name of the writer. That's it, Amanda Holliday. And she did an imaginary interview with Donald Rodney about all the Black artists who'd been either nominated or won the Turner Prize. And it's so funny, it's hilarious, as well as very informative and interesting. And so it's an imaginary interview with Donald Rodney posthumously, but it's really good article. So that's to just introduce that earlier group. And the later group, I've got represented by Sonia Boyce. Now this is a piece, a very contemporary piece, and I haven't seen this yet, but I am going to try and go, well, planning to go and see it. So Sonia Boyce was part of the British Black Arts movement, and I've linked the previous piece with a contemporary work, an exhibition by Boyce at MIMA in Middlesbrough. So this has just opened in Middlesbrough, called In the Castle of My Skin. So I thought that went nicely with the last piece, which was named after a novel by George Lamming. So I haven't seen this yet, but as I understand it, I did copy and paste a bit of text actually, which says about it. That's it. It began on the 11th of June. It's going on till October. It's in MIMA in Middlesbrough. So Sonia Boyce has both curated it. So it's a collection of different artists' work in connection to the theme, and it includes some of her own work. And obviously repeats that theme of skin and identity. But Sonia Boyce and I go back a long while. I actually almost fell in love with her in the 1990s. And I remember going to it was a talk or maybe a workshop day at the V&A. It was definitely maybe, no, it wasn't definitely 90s, it might have been early 2000s. And it was to do with, I think it was to do with wallpapers and the wallpaper collection there. And Sonia Boyce talked about this piece of work, which is an embossed wallpaper with the song, with the words of a song, a popular song at the time, which was sung in the kinds of parties that she would have gone to with her friends and family. And she talked about how people rubbed up against the wallpaper and kinds of smudges and traces were left of the party. But she didn't talk about it. She sang this song, which is embossed. That was her talk. I think lots of people were doing presentations, and she sang the song, and it was so powerful. I half fell in love with her that day. So actually, yeah. So you know, when you sort of fall in love with an artist and their work quite early on, you always have it in their mind, and you're looking to see their current work. But to be fair, Donald Rodney and Sonia Boyce are here because they belong to those early Black artist movements in Britain, and that idea that artists join together to have some kind of visibility if their work isn't accepted, or that they're not accepted or taken, they're overlooked because of gender or race. So that's Sonia Boyce. The next piece was actually very near to, I'm just going to move my pictures along so I can see. So the next piece was on display as part of Creative Hull, just up the road on Whitefordgate from our shop window in Burton's. And it's I'm not pronouncing it properly, the Dira family. And I'm sure most people saw it, but I thought it was an amazing exhibition. And I put this in because it's a group who are working together because they're family. And I suppose that has a bit of an echo with Julia and things that she's done with her family. but that's the reason that they worked together. And the exhibition was called Reception, and the family were living in the, I guess, in the Station Hotel, but like a lot of asylum seekers were living in a hotel, I guess the Station Hotel, throughout lockdown. And each of the paintings was the shape of a door. So it was like the doors of all the different rooms in the hotel, which I found quite powerful, really. And I'm sure, like me, you went to it and talked to them about their work and their experience during, like, arriving in the country and then arriving into lockdown was quite strong. And then the last piece, the last little reference I've got, is to groups who come together around a particular issue-based artwork. So sometimes a community is formed, a community of artists is formed around adversity, oppression, shared values, shared approaches, shared politics, shared aesthetics. But sometimes a community comes together around an issue-based work. And this is one, I think I've shared this before, so maybe some of you have seen it. This is a work that I've just a project that I've just come across by Neville Gabby, called Living Language Land, with little dashes in between if you want to look up the website. And they're sharing 26 words. In fact, if I move that up, you can read it for yourselves. They're sharing 26 words in the run up to November's COP26. And they're words from different cultures across the globe. And those words are about man's relationship with, or people's relationship with the environment or with nature, and saying how much without those words, how can you capture, how can you acknowledge, how can you represent, how can you express the relationship with nature? So we need those words, and some of these words are endangered. So I think they're literally sharing, I don't know what it is, it wouldn't be one a week, would it? Maybe it is one a week, or one every so often, from different cultures. So I really love the idea of this project, and I think it intertwines with the things that people have been talking about. Robert Macfarlane, who did a similar thing, didn't he, about lost words, about our lost, we lose our relationship with nature if we lose some of these languages. So I think it connects with that. And I'm also going to connect it with the idea of losing words. I went to, I'll share some pictures on Facebook. I went to Houghton Hall in Norfolk at the weekend. And there I saw an Anya Galaccio hedge, in which the hedge towered over you, but in which there was a signature of a woman, Sybil, spelt out in the hedge, but you could never see it unless you were a drone or from an aeroplane. All you had was the lovely curved shape of the edge. Maybe you could hedge, or maybe you could make out the dot of the eye. So you walked in and around the words, which I thought was a lovely idea. And I like the idea of words growing in nature, as opposed to this idea of losing words. Excuse me, losing words, and thus losing our relationship to nature. So I felt like there's a little bit of connections there. So that's it. So there's some thoughts there about why artists work together, and then there's some offshoots into things that I'm interested in. I suppose not unlike Julia, I've used it as an opportunity to follow up either people or ideas that I'm interested in. But this last one is about how people might group together, a community of people might group together around an issue-based artwork. And then that's it.
Lovely.
Good.
Oh, thank you. Again, I think there's a bit of a theme where we use actually artist networks to reflect on ourselves a little bit and kind of look at what we're drawn to and what that actually says about our interests, isn't it? It is like, yeah, gathering friends around, isn't it? And have a bit of a conversation about what matters to us. So yeah, thank you, Julia. It's given us, even after having heard a lot about the people that interest you and influence you, there's a few new ones have come up in this presentation. So it's just been adding, to the puzzle that makes up who you are as an artist and as a creative. So thank you. It's
Could I just ask, Jill, with the Dirard family, was that work actually in the exhibition? Because I don't remember seeing it.
That particular one, I think
It was.
maybe it wasn't. I think I just grabbed something off in order to, visually represent
I
it.
got quite busy, so I could have missed it, but I just don't.
I don't think so, no.
I saw it. I saw it.
The interesting thing about that family is when Roger and I were exhibiting in the Contemporary Gallery, they asked me if I would come in for Women's International Day to tell a story, a woman's story. And the mother was there with her daughters, and one of them translated for her. And basically, in the camp, she'd been running an art group in a tent for all the children, and she brought in, and she's amazing, but she couldn't speak any English. And we had a sort of moment, language. And then when I went in to see it, when we went to the opening of the whole creative, and I went across the road to look in it, and I realized it was that family again. The young girl who translated for a mother, it was extraordinary because she'd become this very confident, she'd spoke at the whole creative, she'd become this super confident young woman from being this quite little girl, I thought, a couple of years back in the gallery in Bridlington. And they're just wonderful. And I mean, some of the work was better than others, but I love the whole family working together thing, because obviously family matters.
I mean, in that exhibition as well, it was interesting because there was connections to other African artists as well, African American, like Basquiat. And it was interesting to see how their work has developed being here, because I went to see them in Bridlington as well, and they had an installation, and it was all about being on the actually, and coming here, and the experiences of being in, coming across on a boat, including death and drowning and all sorts of things. So they're very deep, and their connections between them is really strong. There's brothers as well, actually. There's a couple of brothers. But and I liked the way that you brought in, Jill, all the those movements, which is really, because they're not always included into British art history. You see what I mean? Or I did go to the Donald Rodney. I went to an exhibition of his in Manchester, actually, because Manchester had a big exhibition of lots of, and Manchester Museum, an art gallery, they've had, and I've been to Birmingham. I did travel around the country for a bit in the mid-2000s, I think it was, and I went to Birmingham and a lot of, I saw Sonia Boyce's work. It was good to see that some people's, but they're always connected to other things as well, like networks in the community. Now there is this joining with, like climate change groups, and there's more to think about than just simply identity politics, I suppose, which is why a lot of artists band together. In the 80s, I was living in London, I was part of the Brixton Art Gallery. Now, the Brixton Art Gallery was interesting. It was under an arch by the train station, and it had exhibitions of artists from all over the world. So especially people who are in exile, because there was people in exile in London in the 80s. So you had Polish and South African. And again, I was part of, they had a Black artist group as well. And it was interesting because the Black artist group had men and women in it. And we all decided that we wanted to have separate exhibitions, like a men's exhibition and a women's exhibition. So, and it was the first time that everybody had sort of started talking about, well, because men want to say certain things, and this is the Black men in the group, and then the Black women wanted to say something else. So, and then you've got Paula Rego. I met Paula Rego at Leeds City Art Gallery as part of the Friends of the Gallery group, because I worked at the gallery for a few months, and I met her actually, and I always found her work very women. It was all about women's angst. You know, there was issues around all sorts of things that contradicted what was, you know, expected in a Catholic Portuguese society, but also, you know, world issues as well. That Me Too thing that you get, that culminated, you know, last year really with Epstein. But you get some women artists that are so, they're on point, you know, in pictures. I remember because I asked her about the dogs in her pictures. I don't know why. I was into Chinese astrology. I said, and she said she was a dog. She was actually born in the year of the dog. And I said, oh, I'm a dog as well. So we sort of connected being dogs. Which is, so this, and again, that's the network, isn't it? Being part of an astrological group or a society that is into astrology and moonology and things like that, which I have been looking at myself.
I think she related in the dogs thing in the other night that it was very much to do with, like one, it's lying on the owner's coat and it's a woman, but it's the dog. And she always uses the same model a lot. And she has a way of crouching, and and then she's been kicked out of the bed because she's pissed the bed. And then it was, oh God, they were all, and it was all relating to women being dogs, but not in a Chinese, literally women being the possessions of men and being their pets.
Yeah.
Although she explains it in such a wonderful way when she talks about it, you know, that was the reality of it. Saying, you know, women are dogs, you know, being treated like dogs. And it was quite, but are you lucky you met her? I think Chloe's met her, actually. Chloe wanted to be a model for her.
I was in awe of her, you know, because this is the Friends of the Gallery, and they were a bit snooty, really, and because it was all about raising money to buy works for the gallery. So there was a lot of people there who were investors, if you see what I mean. So it was like a sherry party type thing. And I worked there, and I'd had run-ins with the leader, the woman who ran this group as well, because she working in that gallery, there was such issues going on with the staff, you know, that everybody treated each other like, you know, oh, you can't get the help these days. I had that directed at me at one point. I was like, you bitch, basically. But, you know, well, I didn't stay long there anyway, but actually I got invited to this thing, even against her wishes in a sense. But no, she did invite me because one of the directors of the gallery said, yeah, you know, come with me. Because he wanted to include all the staff in the gallery, you know, the information assistants, the receptionists and people like that. And and she was really nice, you know, Paula Rego was really nice, but it was a bit like meeting the Queen. She was lovely though. She was, nice.
Excellent. Oh, thank you so much, Julia. Okay, who would like to go next? Sorry, Jill. Sorry, God, I'm feeling really tired all of a sudden. I'm so sorry. Julia, again, you just. Julia.
I don't mind taking credit.
Of course.
I've got a short one. If you want to finish soon,
yeah, Roger. Let's hear yours. And
Right.
don't worry about time, you know, you get all the attention you deserve as well. We're not going to cut you short.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, this one has been difficult. I appreciate that most of my responses to date have seen me back in the old country of my past. And I've tried, believe me, I've tried to stay away from it this time, but I found this topic particularly challenging. I started thinking about this, going head on, looking at art movements, and rapidly realized not only how limited my knowledge in that area is, but also how much I don't want this to be history of art revisited, with me delving into the many art books scattered around the house, or worse, Wikipedia, to cobble together a micro thesis. Not surprisingly, this is all to do with my experience at what was the Regional College of Art, 1970 to 73, where on a weekly basis, I would make my way down to the basement of the Annalby Road site to where my history of art tutor, Malcolm Cook, held court.
Oh.
No picture of Malcolm Cook exists on the internet, so I'm using the next best thing. Certainly looked like Henry VIII, and also had the gravitas, and going into his room was like going down to a Tudor dungeon. He was my first real-life intellectual, who had allegedly attended a Pink Floyd concert and taken notes. He was my personal paper shredder, ripping my ideas to pieces and exposing the gaping chasm of my ignorance. I would sit opposite him and look out through the narrow windows towards the Regent Cinema across the road, which always seemed to be showing a seedier sort of film. Truck Stop Women comes back to mind, one of its more restrained offerings. It was as if the baser form of life was trying to pull me back and hobble my first tentative steps, enticing me away from thought cerebral and back into the world in which I had grown up. Only on one occasion did Malcolm Cook's mask slip. It was when Ken Russell's Savage Messiah, a biopic of the sculptor Henry Gaudier Breshka, was showing at the cinema. I drew Malcolm Cook's attention to the poster's strapline, "All art is sex." He quietly muttered that he thought it should be the other way around. So somehow a thesis finally evolved on the Camden Town Group. But it certainly did a job in sorting me out to the fact that academia was not to be my métier. And so we're going back down the rabbit hole of time. Cue the weird harp music, pages from the calendar flying by. And we're back, yes, back on the farm, and it's early 1950s, a few days before Christmas. It's cold, there's a chance of snow, and it's not a great time for poultry. This is my chosen supportive group, my then extended family, coming together to help prepare the geese and chickens for the festive market. This was obviously pre-supermarket, and things were done on a more personal basis then. Everyone played a part, even me, no more than 5 years old, having to hold a torch in order that my uncle, who had just emerged from the squawking, feathery mayhem of the poultry shed, clutching a pure white goose, could see to cut the unfortunate creature's throat. Then all back to the rain-sheeted kitchen, the only downstairs room ever properly habited on that farm, and every one I've visited since, where assorted relatives were at work, feathering, whilst recent gossip was exchanged and laughter flowed freely. The downy white feathers were knee-high throughout, burying the sleeping sheepdogs, which you stepped on at your peril. Occasionally, a not quite yet dead goose would suddenly flap its wings, briefly turning the whole room into a magical but sinister snow globe. Slowly the feathers would float down and settle, with some landing in the bloody bath of heads, feet, and drawn giblets at the centre of the room, and turning immediately crimson. The butcher's shops stink of blood and guts still lingers. But believe it or not, this was not the reason behind my conversion to vegetarianism years later. And so the transformation was complete. The 20 or so Czech geese, which I had seen emerge from their shells in the incubator, which had been protected from marauding foxes, and which terrified me with their stretched necked warnings to stay away, were now a neat row of pink, featherless carcasses, trussed and neatly arranged on a cold stone slab. On the task completion, the assembled group of relatives slowly began to disintegrate, drifting away to their own homes, satisfied in the knowledge that they had come and worked together once again to get the job done and support the farm.
Oh. Oh dear.
Oh, Roger, you did it again.
Like back to the Bosch picture.
You made us all smile.
Oh, you cried.
Thank you. Thank you. And another completely different angle. Love bringing in the family and that network and people coming together. And interesting that you mentioned torch, actually. You know, we're going to Wales. And the woman sent an email saying, make sure you have a torch in the car because it's so dark at night, you won't even see the key. So there must be something about Wales and dark and torches. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that was good. Oh, I liked all the aunties and uncles. It was just like, it's like
The gang.
the gang. Yeah, but it's like that your first networks are your family, aren't they? And your extended and whoever comes into your life when you're 5.
All these networks have been families.
Yes.
You know, whether that is family of like or you know, kind of, it doesn't. With the last one that Jill mentioned, kind of this. I can't find it now, but anyway, Gabby, is it? And the language, that's as we've discovered with this group, you know, you can find that family across cultures and across countries and continents. You don't have to now all be living in the same part of one country. But I think that kind of like the Duras or Roger's family, or this kind of like this search for people who get you, is what makes these networks strong. And then you have that kind of like trusting relationship, and you have this kind of support. So I think you know, kind of, it's like Paula offers you support across a distance, Julia, I think. I don't know. It's just all the time I've kept thinking about how it's family. So it's lovely, Roger, that you ended with that family. Yeah, I'm beautifully told.
Yeah, beautifully
as
told.
Always.
Roger, did you all get together on Boxing Day and sing Lloyd George Knew My Father?
No, we didn't.
So that's what we did. We didn't have a car, but once a year one uncle or someone would drive us down to our extended family in Portsmouth, and on Boxing Day this was always surprised me. We'd always sit round everybody and sing this song which just had the words Lord George knew my father knew Lord George, and it just went on like that for ages. So that's my extended family network memories. I just imagined you'd done the same. Can't think why not.
I left there when I was 6, so I mean, it was, but it does have a lot of memories, you know, and most of them sort of slightly unpleasant.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, I didn't know some of those things. I know, and we've just been through a box of very old photographs to bring together our families and make a kind of collage today, haven't we, Roger?
Yeah.
Quite incidentally, because I never know what Roger's going to do. He went, you know, he knows what I'm going to do because I have
helps you.
He helps me. But the thing that I feel, the reason I love reading books about people's background, because you understand them better. I mean, you can, you know, like the Paula Rego film is lovely when you see her dancing with Victor Willing in Portugal. I think he got a good deal there going to Portugal with it, didn't he? But it's
painting.
It's so, yeah, I know it did. I know it did. Ironically, she thrived and he just decided it was the easy life, didn't he, really, in a way? But I love that when you dip into biographies or just, you know, reading things like bits of Vasari and all these things that tell you, like me knowing that Piero di Cosmo ate boiled eggs. It's just ridiculous, but they're the things that make you feel like you're all part of a big family of artists. I mean, I've been at the doctor's this morning and I told the doctor, I don't know anybody except artists. Because I told him he was clever because he works hard. He went, no. And I just said, oh, well, I only know artists. And then I thought, oh God, I'm saying all artists are stupid, which is not what I meant at all. I just meant
a certain kind of thinking.
Yeah, a certain way, the outsiders. And, you know, we are strangely outsiders, aren't we? Because it takes a long time, as you said, Sarah, to find people who get you. And sometimes even your own family don't get you along the way. They have a few problems with you, but you know, we are all dipping in all the time, dipping into our past and our memories. And I think, if anything, this pandemic has made that even more so. This need to connect with where we've come from and what we're part of, and even down to the nature and, you know, what's really important. Sorry, I'm getting a bit emotional.
I think it's about helping you get yourself, I think, as well, because
Very good, very good.
Because a group can give you some things, but it is also about being part of something that's bigger than yourself, but also because for me, I mean, I've never really considered myself a proper artist, quite honestly. But but it's not to say I don't think of myself as an artist. It's just, you know, the path I've been on, or has sometimes been a bit sort of all over the place, because I have got lots of interests which go off into different tangents or whatever. So, but yeah, it's all about getting yourself. I think when Sarah said, who gets you, because we're all quite intense and we can still shock each other or surprise each other by things like you and Roger, you know, and I've been going through a lot of photographs, and some of them have been so hard to look at 30 years later, 40 years later, 50 years later, you know, it's like, and it's about going, yes, I get it now, or, you know, and that's why it's good being part of all these different wonderful connections.
I love what
in the world.
I love that you said getting yourself, because what I was talking about when I said your family don't even always get you is growing up as a child. I was lucky to have a very supportive sister. My mother was only interested in gardening most of the time. Forgot to send me to school for a whole year, which we were talking about today. That she just got the date wrong because my birthday's the 1st of September. So I didn't go to school till a year later, so I just played for her. My sister kept telling her she needs to go to school. But, you know, but it is getting yourself and having that confidence that other people in a group can give you and make you feel, well, I'm not mad, I'm not crazy, believe these things and feel these things, because here are a whole other group of people. And weirdly, once you do show confidence, some of those people who didn't get you start to think, oh.
Get her now.
Oh, right, okay. Because as long as you doubt yourself all the time, then you can't expect anybody to go with you on your
that's true.
thing, journey, whatever.
No, I think that's, yeah, I think that's at the heart of all of these presentations so far, isn't it? It is a way to find yourself, to get support as well, isn't it? Even if it's just sometimes maybe imaginary, or a lot of these people we don't know, apart from obviously your aunts and uncles, which is, you know, where your presentation is slightly different. But, you know, apart from Glynis, who's met Paula, you know, you have met those people. So it's almost like our imagination of what they probably really are like, because I know there's interviews and reports, but there's a lot of ourselves projected onto them as well, maybe, and this idealized version. Maybe this, you know, what you're saying is kind of that confidence building. It's like, oh, you know, I see myself in that person, and that person is well known, you know, all throughout history. So there's something really, yeah, supportive in that, because it gives us something, doesn't it? Even if it's just a certain reflection, a certain aspect.
They're like our imaginary friends. They're like you have when you
But it's, yeah, no, I mean, we still have to hear from quite a few people in the group, but I'm really interested. I know I'm still, you know, thinking about it in a way, because I think every time we bring forward a topic, it just makes you think about these things, and it's interesting to see where you go with it, isn't it? And I found a lot that I'm looking, well, why am I drawn to this group? What do I see in that group? Why is it that particular group? And it's weird, isn't it? It is. It fascinates me on a very big level, isn't it? What actually makes us drawn to certain things? Where does that come from? You know?
It's very odd, Marianne, though, going up the attic. It's like coming to meet a different version of myself. And there's quite a few versions up there. So it's a bit like Alice in Wonderland, I suppose, a lot of the time.
That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Marianne, I loved your photographs. I wanted to see that of your home in Germany and your father. And everything about it. It was just wonderful. I loved looking at the photos that you posted of your home, where you grew up.
Well, thank you. I think I think, yeah, you reach an age, isn't it? You want to capture it, and it's so hard to capture, actually, kind of, you know, magic, the memories, what a place means to you, isn't it? So, because that house, I mean, I know we often spoke about houses, but the house, for me, there's just so much there. Yeah, it's nice. Try to convey a tiny bit, but there's still a lot more. So, yeah, but thank you. It's a nice place. Oh, it's lots of memories and lots of what makes us, isn't it? And I think you kind of look at these places and you think, yeah, you know, this is actually why I like mid-century stuff. I never realized that, you know, there is a lot of mid-century kind of the doors or even vases, you know, and when you grow up, you don't notice these things, but they just impact you and imprint on you. This is what I mean. It's like, you know, what makes you drawn to Paula Rego? Is there something in your past? It's just really interesting, isn't it? And this is what's lovely about this group, isn't it? We always kind of go deep a little bit, isn't it, into our own histories and into our own selves. So thank you all again, you know, and we still have lots of others to look forward to. So, I mean, I was going to try and kind of call in next week from Wales. Roger's laughing. So, but where does everybody stand? Are you okay to kind of pause it another week and we'll kind of resume properly?
Yes.
Yeah, I can't make it next week, so that would be brilliant, but see what everyone thinks.
No, I'd be quite happy. I mean, having heard everybody tonight, I'm looking at my contribution thinking, I better do a bit more work on this. So another week would be very good.
Well, let's do that then. And I think Sarah's away as well, Sarah Mole. So, yeah, let's have another mini break next week.
And also for you can just go away and really be away, and that's good.
I know, but I love being with you guys, so it's fine.
There's lots of pictures of you with wine glasses in your hand.
Post pictures.
Landscape.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, thank you very much, and have a nice mini break next week. Whatever you do, post pictures, share stories, and thank you. See you in 2 weeks.
Well,
Bye to everybody.
Bye,
Have a good
everybody.
week.
Have a good week.
Bye.
And I hope you feel better soon, Glynis.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
You've still
thanks.
got that silly cough, haven't you?
Yeah,
Yeah, it'll be pulling you down a bit.
Yeah, I'm on the antibiotics, but
Yeah.
almost finished. Yeah.
Take
So,
care.
yeah.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.
Sure, thanks.